Good morning. This is Daily Hebrew Declarations with Daniel Jedediah Cook, and I'm reading the declaration for today, March the 2nd, 2021. The three Hebrew letters we're honoring today are Samech, Beit, and Shin. Along with those three living letters, we're also honoring the Spirit of understanding, the Spirit of the Lord, and the Spirit of might. The declaration today reads this: supernatural support spiraling through to an ascended dwelling place, a place for the divine, consuming and being consumed by the fire of Yahweh's heart. This really has spoken a lot to me today. Michelle and I, when we first got up this morning, we usually sit down and have a cup of coffee, and many times we talk about the declaration. Sometimes the declaration is one of those things that just speaks to both of us. Of course, she's the author of all of these declarations, and then I come in and I'll do the podcasts about not only what we discuss and what we talk about. Sometimes it's just what Yahweh has got placed on our hearts. Today's declaration really begins to speak of a place where I've been over the last little bit. This past weekend, we had a couple of meetings online, and in both occasions, Yahweh took us into a place where we began to engage together. And in that engagement, we began to see this place of where Yahweh was taking us in through a door. Now, you guys may remember over the last couple of declarations and the last couple of podcasts where I talked about this place of Yahweh having me go to the treasury rooms of heaven. And inside of the treasury rooms of heaven, everything that I could have ever needed, everything that Yahweh has ever promised me, everything that I can't describe the blessings and the everything that's there. It's just beyond comprehension to be even to even try to. And I do my best to try to explain, but it's difficult because the beauty is there to things that sometimes here on the earth, if we look at it from the earthly perspective, there isn't any beauty to it, or at least from a natural perspective. But yet, from this perspective of the treasury rooms of heaven, they're absolutely beautiful because there's a treasure hidden beneath what appears to be sometimes ugliness, at least ugliness in the sense of the natural eyes. And so then it begins to make me wonder, who am I to judge even what might consider as being ugly? I talked about it this past weekend when I was talking about the mustard seed. Many times my problem with the faith as a grain of a mustard seed had to do with the fact that I looked at that little tiny mustard seed as nothing, as little, as even though the Bible says that it can be planted and it will grow into the biggest bush or biggest tree in the garden. The fact is that it begins as this little tiny thing. And even when I think about the bush aspect of that or the tree aspect of that, there's still limitations because their mountains are bigger than the trees. You see what I'm saying? I know that seems silly, but yet in the same breath, my mind immediately goes to this place of comparison and comparing one thing against another until Yahweh took me in and began to reveal to me what that little tiny dot contained. And I realized that little tiny dot contained all that there is. And I was looking at it the wrong way the whole time. It wasn't little. It had everything that was needed, everything that we would ever need, everything that Yahweh had ever promised us was wrapped up inside of that little tiny dot. So you see, it's in that place that Yahweh has really given us supernatural support, even by that measure of faith. Each one of us have been given a measure of faith, and Yahweh has given us this place of Himself inside of us. Well, that piece of Yahweh that's inside of us is far more than enough that we can ever think, dream, or imagine. And then really, if that's the case, follow out my analogy here. But if that's the case, then these pieces are crying out to come together as one. They're crying out to be connected together as one. So the peace of Yahweh inside of me is crying out not only to Yahweh, but also to you because of the Yahweh in you and the connection of coming together as one in Him. You see, in this place of supernatural support, in this place of Samek, because Samek represents supernatural support, it talks about that. There's many different reasons as to why that's the case, and one of the ones that stick out the most is the explanation that the sages would say about Samek. Because when Yahweh wrote on the sapphire cubes, when Moshe was up on the mountain, now that we're talking about Moses, when he was receiving the Ten Commandments, the first set of blocks, the first set that was smashed on the ground, when he came down and saw the people of Israel that were worshiping the golden calf, he smashed those. But the sages and the rabbis believe that those stones that were written on by the hand of Yahweh himself, and they were sapphire cubes. They were sapphire, pure sapphire. And so when Yahweh wrote the really, if you will, the 10 words, when we go to the 10 commandments, 10 commandments is actually probably a little bit of a misnomer, because in Hebrew they're known as the 10 words, and Yahweh spoke 10 words. Well, as he was writing those, the word went all the way through to the other side of the sapphire cube. So if you think about it, Samek, it being a letter that is completely enclosed, and it's the only one of the 22 Hebrew living letters that is completely enclosed. Well, gravity would say that center part should fall out because there's nothing holding it. But yet, in the sapphire cube, it remained. It didn't move. And so it was being supernaturally supported in the center, so that it was very, very obvious what that letter is when it was looked at on the sapphire cube. So hence the reason for the place of supernatural support. But not only that, it can be seen as a thorn and several other things. But for right now, I want to stick with that aspect of it, because in this place, Yahweh took me in a little bit further with Samek, and began to help to allow me to see a little bit more. Because if you look at, if I was to take that whole sapphire cube, and let's just say, again, we're talking about an analogy here. Let's say that Yahweh was that whole sapphire cube. Then I was the inner part of the Samek inside of that letter. So in other words, I'm the one that's being supernaturally supported. You are the one that's being supernaturally supported inside of the fullness of Yahweh. But he took me even further with that, because I began to think about the place of, but Yahweh, as I look at your face, Yahweh, I want to become what I behold. I want to see you and become you here on the earth. And so I began to notice that as I looked at that center part of the Samek, the part that had a gap between there and Yahweh himself, if you will, that there were parts as I began to look into his face that would begin to attach into Yahweh himself. And as it did, that center part began to grow larger and larger and larger and larger, to the point where the inner part of the circle had met up with the outer part of the circle. And it hit me. The vision that Yahweh was taking me through was the place of how we become more and more like him. And so the expression of that, and our expression of who Yahweh is in us. Now, I'm not saying that we're God, but we are a reflection and a facet of him. We are a part of him. He has made us to be a part of himself. And so in that place where we fully become him in the earth, then really that inner part of that circle is completely enclosed, so that when people look at us, even as a facet of the diamond of Yahweh, as facet of Yahweh himself, when people look at us, they don't know where he begins and we end, or we end and he begins, because all they see is him. That's the point of all of this anyway. All they see is him. And what is the supernatural support for anyway? Is it just for us? Or is it for the place of all of God's people? As each one of us begin to pull and to draw on one another, to begin to see the fullness, because you have a treasure that I don't have. I have a treasure that you don't have. And as we share that treasure together, we come together as one, and we begin to really have that place of what Yahweh began to show me as the exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. You see, this is the ascended dwelling place. This is the place for the divine. We look like him, we act like him. Matter of fact, when people see us, they see him, they don't see us. And in that place, we are consuming and being consumed by the fire of Yahweh's heart, burning inside of us. It's not a fire that's taking off the dross. In this case, no. This is the fire of Yahweh's glory burning inside of us.